based on the legal framework through the Securities Act of Maldives to implement a sandbox regulatory framework and enabling innovative avenues in the market, especially Islamic crowdfunding. Over to you, Shra. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you, Brother Shiraz. Here in the Maldives, we have had many challenges in the development of financial markets, especially legal barriers. For example, we don't have law on trusts, which is needed for some Islamic financing contracts, especially considering the fact that foreigners cannot own land here, which is a problem for transactions in underlying assets in Islamic finance. Also, no secure transaction law or collateral law, which complicates things even further. No anti-competition law as well, but I think one is in the drafting process. Another problem is that in the Maldives, currently, if you want to raise finance in the securities market, you would first have to register as a public limited company, or at least convert into a PLC, for which you will need at least 10 shareholders, 5 board directors, and 1 million in paid up capital. And you can only raise funds up to your paid up capital. So this complicates things for smaller companies. To participate in the market. There's absolutely no room for startups or individuals or sole proprietors to publicly seek investment opportunities in Maldives at the moment from the capital market, which actually stops crowdfunding platforms from being introduced as well. So these limitations don't just come from the Securities Act. This is the main problem. Actually, some other laws directly and indirectly influence the capital market of Maldives. So just fixing the Securities Act alone is not a solution in itself. The other bigger problem, much bigger problem, is that some of these laws are really vague and generalized. We have had some instances where institutions, even government institutions, challenged our jurisdiction. They don't recognize the CMD's power in some cases, which makes it really difficult for us to do our job as a regulator. So so this is just the beginning of the problems we face. Cost of borrowing is another issue. The capital market of Maldives is organized into the stock exchange, dealing brokerage companies and other market participants, such as investment advisors, Sharia advisors, and the list of intermediaries just keeps on going. So each of these services actually add to the cost of borrowing, and we have to think of ways to to make the market more attractive in terms of to make it more competitive compared to that of bank financing. So these are private sector institutions that we are talking about, so they charge a significant amount. This becomes an even larger problem in Maldives as we are geographically dispersed into many islands, and we don't have automated systems, no online trading system, and with a relatively small population, there is no way to generate economies of scale. So the fees which these private institutions charge is relatively higher than in developed markets. So this actually is a big, huge barrier for smaller companies to come into the market. Coming back to the point, the regulatory sandbox, we have realized that this might be the solution for most of our problems. The concept is quite modern. I think the first regulatory sandbox was set up in the UK around 5 years ago in 2015. So it's actually quite recent. And since we are in the process of bringing amendments to the Securities Act, we have put in provisions that enable the CMDA to set up sandbox in the Maldives. So the regulatory sandbox will allow for live testing of innovations under the CMD oversight, of course. New financial products, technologies, business models can be tested under the rules and safeguards which we have put in place, which we will put in place. The best thing is that it can be set up outside of the existing regulatory framework. So this actually will give us an opening that we need to fix things, the fundamental problems with the economy, and hopefully attract innovative firms from abroad, fixing the current problems in the market. What we are looking for is, for example, innovations like biometric ID, which I think is a game changer, will be a game changer for KYC and signature requirements, and opens up venues for like electronic KYC. Interestingly, in India, what they have done is to require fingerprints and retinal scans for national IDs. So if they want a national ID card, they have to go and give the government their fingerprint and retinal scan. So what this enables is now Indians can, at the leisure of their home, they can just open a bank account using their mobile phone and fingerprint. So this is really cool, actually exciting for Maldives, especially let's say a person from an island, they want to open a securities depository account. they have to physically come to Male, the capital city, and open the account and go back, or have to attest all the documents and post, or which is really not convenient, not practical.
Correct.
So
Ishraq, I'll
another
stop
thing,
you there. I'll bring in Tanvir at this point. He has quite a wide international experience, and having heard Ishraq's points, how would you advise startup entrepreneurs on strategizing and focusing their business with an alignment on social objectives and facing such challenges that have been described?
Yeah, sure. So I'll start a little bit abstract first and sort of then come in to address the regulatory and sort of the initial challenges which the regulatory sandbox is trying to solve. So yeah. I think the first thing to realize with any startups is what is the core mission or the purpose of the why, that to answer the question of why does that startup exist and what problem it's trying to solve. Now, some problems will lend itself to having a social dimension. And so if that's the case, it needs to be very clear from the get-go. And the whole startup needs to build its culture and product to address that social issue. However, if that's not the case, I would strongly, I guess, encourage to avoid trying to force fit a social impact aspect and rather focus on, and if we think of business, and especially from an Islamic ethos perspective, thinking of business as creating social good just by trade. So you buy and sell products that are of value to customers, you treat customers fairly, you follow the laws, you treat your employers fairly, and as a result, it creates, it generates a positive economic and social outcome. So I think, let's not underestimate what business can do. But if you are a social impact focused startup, then it's really important that, that you identify opportunities for partnership. And especially we're talking about the Maldives in terms of geographic challenges and also the regulatory challenges. So I'll come to address Ishraq's point, which is, whilst the law might not allow certain startups to form from the get-go, that does not mean that they can't work. So, I'll be looking towards the major Islamic players or Islamic finance companies that are already there, Maldives Islamic Bank, for example, and saying, what opportunities are you providing for startups to partner with you? For example, are you creating your own venture fund? Are you creating ways to license your own regulatory, sort of, if you are licensed to provide issue securities, can you share that license, or can you provide a licensing structure so a startup could build an initiative, go through the regulatory sandbox and then develop it, and Maldives Islamic Bank could retain equity while that startup is continuing to grow. So my big idea or the big suggestion there would be that if you are interested in social, especially if you're interested in social impact, but even if you're not, how can you leverage partnerships with government and other established players to overcome those initial startup requirements and then grow from there? And if the local players can't do it, then is it possible to do an international partnership? So that would be the key point there to think about.
Thank you, Ishraq and Tanvir. That was some valuable thoughts. Sorry, these are topics that we can go on and on, but time is a factor. I think we can always take it offline. Looking at our next topic in the list is on financial centers, domicile of regional funds and trustee services. I would like to call upon Tiron Hanan, who has a wide experience with international international financial institutions and a strong expertise on the subject. Tiron, what will be your opinion and recommendation to the Maldives capital market based on new products introduced in the Sri Lankan market and plans for the future?
Listening to our colleagues from Maldives in this session, Shahardin and Ishraq, and also following what was happening in the first session, realize that there's a difficulty in going forward on the regulation side for implementation. So what I would think is sometimes you might leave that aside and look elsewhere. So for your investors, Sri Lanka has, for example, has created a dollar board. I must tell you, it's with the Maldives companies in mind, where they're giving them a facility or enable them to come and list their company shares on a dollar board, so that there is no downsides of convertibility to local currency. So it has been created, because I'm part of that team that was working on the stock exchange closely. They had the Maldives in mind, of course, for different reasons. It took some time, but now it's very much established, where not only a Maldivian company, but it was meant for the Maldives, there have been some inquiries for Mauritius, from Cayman Islands on how they can list some of the company shares. So the stock exchange in Colombo is very open to that, where they will allow companies to come and list their shares on a dollar board. Another feature that I can talk about right now, which is on REITs, because now in Sri Lanka, if you had visited Sri Lanka about say 8 to 10 years ago, and you visit now, or even for us locals, we have seen the skyline change. We have many high-rise buildings, residential housing has come up. So there is a big need for financing, which the banks have been playing that role, but now they're going beyond that. And the Securities Exchange Commission has come up with the framework to allow REITs to be traded as another asset class. So that has been set under the Unit Trust Code. The Unit Trust is a well-established business here. It's about 30 years. So there are about 70 odd open-ended funds, and the fund manager is excited because now this is a new asset class they can get into. So this is an opportunity for companies in the Maldives to play that role. And I can tell you, foreigners have a better chance than the locals in investing in the stock market. Of course, they'll have to open a bank account, but that is facilitated. The facilities are very much available because the country is also, hoping for investments to come in different forms, FDIs or otherwise, for the development of the country, Sri Lanka itself, which, recently there was a election, and some of the personalities who have been invested are very market friendly. So that's a good sign. So these are two off the top I can think of where Maldives can benefit from a neighbor on the investment side.
Yeah. Thank you, Tiron. I'll come back to you once we go into a topic with Ishraq. Turning your focus onto you, Ishraq, looking at the private placement market in Maldives, will you be able to give your comments with respect to any specific provisions aimed at economic recovery from the situation that we are coming to through the pandemic using this type of asset class?
Actually, in 2019, we were in the process of launching an online platform that is a hybrid between issuing securities on the capital market and to that of private placement. So essentially, what we were trying to do was to introduce an organized, regulated market for privately placed instruments within the existing capital market framework. But we were just about to launch the platform back in 2019 when the whole COVID crisis hit, and CMDA board immediately requested a review of the existing framework and bring in relief measures for those companies under distress. So we have been in the process of amending the rules and hopefully get to launch with revised provisions in the next few months, inshallah. To be more specific, companies now do not have to convert or register as a PLC. We have introduced the option to issue equity now. Before it was only debt. We have enabled startups and even partnerships to raise finance on the platform, with minimal compliance measures, including reduced financial maintenance covenants, reduced ratios that have to be maintained, reduced disclosure regime and ongoing obligations also reduced. Also from the investor perspective, to bring in more investors, to increase investor participation, we have decided to remove investor eligibility criteria altogether. So with the new measures, SMEs and companies under distress will hopefully be able to address their financial needs on the platform. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Tiron, very quickly, will you be able to share some ways? I mean, you mentioned some products that are very suitable for companies from Maldives to list in the Sri Lankan market and Sri Lankan board. But with REITs coming in and with unit trusts very mature, share some ways that the Maldivian investor, as an individual, could invest in the Sri Lankan fund market.
Yeah, this listening to what Ishraq just said. See, we have a very deep, what shall I say, informal market in a way where investors bypass the banks now and go directly and invest in companies, mostly securitizations, receivables against their vehicles. That's the primary one. Other than that, there are rentals done. So, investors have an opportunity now to bypass that. Of course, they are taking a little more risk, so of course the returns are higher. For them, they are looking at companies which, from a rating angle, you're talking of a double B. They are not, or even below that. Of course, there are many safeguards now because, see, I'm working in a bank where I'm as a trustee. We build some safeguards around that for the sake of the investor. And that market has really grown because it's a matter of comfort for the investors that, first time they invest and they get paid, then there's a repeat. And I can tell you that market has grown so much now the central bank is trying to step in and trying to regulate that in different ways, which is a good thing because at least the players are regulated, but sometimes, it can get, you can get some naughty players as well. So that's something that they'll have to manage. But so other than that, for investors, see, our unit trust industry is well established. Quite a bit of foreign players are there. I've not seen anyone from Maldives yet. Maybe the awareness is not there. But the mechanism to enter that market and go out has been quite good because somehow this is very regulated, I must say, because the players are regulated. Each of these fund managers are licensed, including us as trustees have to be approved for each issue. And every documentation has to be approved by the Securities Commission. So there's a lot of, let's say, pluses on that side, which is comfortable for an investor. So Maldives have a quite a sort of, I must say, the awareness has to be made for them to invest outside. I don't know what the regulation is, whether it allows companies or individuals or funds from the Maldives to come out of and invest out of Maldives, or what the restrictions are. But certainly, Sri Lanka has made it very easy for foreign investors to come in.
Thanks, Tiron. I think that's a good subject to look at and maybe even develop a full-blown workshop for the Maldivian investors, investment forum sort of thing. Yeah.
Just to add one thing, Srinivas.
Yes, Osman.
Yes, I think Taron has it pretty right. I think about the laws, the regulations to attract investors, which Sri Lanka does have, and Mauritius also we have the same kind of laws. Everything is regulated. We attract investors. Investors come in. Investors go out. There is no forex control. Free repatriation of profit. There is a tax credit. All these will make a country to become a hub. Can make a country become a hub by defining, by applying the necessary laws and regulation, which is very important.
Yeah, true. Moving to our final subject in our panel discussion is, could outsourcing play a major or more critical role in the HR strategies of institutions? I think business process outsourcing to centers of service excellence has matured in many parts of the globe. Such centers of excellence have either been created within countries, within their own countries, such as in the UAE, in Sri Lanka, or they depend on overseas centers such as in India or Indonesia. I think I read a little bit on what Maldives have been doing. Outsourcing of HR management services is quite popular here. And also I think payroll services are getting popular within Maldives. Probably also IT services to a lesser extent. However, the potential of utilizing the facilities of service excellence centers that are in close proximity may be something to ponder, especially for servicing high volume routine processes. Shahbaz, can you enlighten us on the legal framework in Maldives towards the human resource strategies for further enhancing the outsourcing opportunities?
Thank you. I'm not been able to observe any legal barriers for the outsourcing of HR strategy in Maldives.
Right.
I think the public sector is a little bit different because the structure of each organization is fixed. But we have to consider whether there are other factors at play as to why outsourcing is not more prevalent, despite the cost-saving advantages. But things will change after COVID, since I think a lot of businesses will be looking into restructuring.
I think today's context post-COVID, everybody is looking at to cut off the excess meat in their processes. So you got to look at your process and see what best is to be done. On this perspective of resource outsourcing and the impacts within the financial industry, I think Tiron can give us some view of the Sri Lankan environment, which could be a model for the Maldivians. See, Tiron? Tiron, your mic is off.
see, one good thing is the government stepped in very early to ensure to safeguard the employees of companies. So there was a lot of support given from the government side, and so the companies, they sort of reacted as well. So there was this process of saying working remotely, so there was no laying off basically, even in industries like garments, where they managed that process. So that has gone very well with no wonder they won the elections, So in that situation, what the companies did was they sort of rotated staff at a time. And we have heard of situations where there has been sort of delayed sort of allowances paid, but no sort of cuts in salaries. But there has been a few companies which the regulator has not been happy with it. The central bank, where the financial services are concerned, they wanted people to be, to do different things to keep their staff going. So maybe that's a lesson which, but sometimes it's difficult. You can't tell a company who is not having any business how to manage their staff. So that's a tough one, but somehow Sri Lanka managed that process. So that's why maybe Shiraz was saying that it seems that we had got it right in some places mostly. So that's something to look at, how the labor laws has helped the employees in this situation.
Yeah, thanks, Tiron. One quick point on that is, say, today's world in business, customer experience is key. And everybody is in all industries, they're looking at satisfying the customer's experience, and the challenges that are posed through that are being looked at. And to satisfy a sort of a human interaction, you need more staff in the front line to meet the customers. I think if you start looking at the processes and make it a bit more efficient and leaner, you may move those staff, retrain, and put them into the front line, give them some tech training, give a tab onto them and say, okay, now go and meet the clients and open accounts at their home front. I mean, this is a thought that just came off the cuff. Yeah, we have a couple of minutes more. We have done well as a team. If I may go around, just give you 1 or 2 minutes just to sum up on what your views are in the subject. If I can start from Ishraq right on top. Your mic is off, Ishraq.
Yes. Earlier question, with regard to my earlier question about Islamic crowdfunding.
Right.
Actually, we have, I think we actually have quite a big scope for that in Maldives, especially because we can see one really interesting story I would like to share. Something that I got to witness. Yeah.
Very quickly.
Sorry?
Very quickly, I said.
Okay. Something that I got to witness on Facebook, actually. Someone needed funds to install 600,000 rupiah MVR elevator at his house. So he had 200,000 MVR on him, and he needed the balance 400,000. So he drew up an Islamic financing contract based on Musharaka Mutanajisa with an Ijara subcontract with the underlying asset as an elevator. And he shared this to his Facebook friends. And I kid you not, within 4 days, he got oversubscribed. So this shows that we have quite a scope for Islamic crowdfunding in the Maldives, especially.
Innovation. I think that's a very good example. Innovation.
Yes, and especially we can see for not-for-profit charitable crowdfunding initiatives in the Maldives, especially those in need for medical treatment. We see that even without an online platform, a really good response from the public, and regulations need to come in to prevent fraud, and we need to organize these markets. And another interesting thing that happened was CMDA was approached by a Malaysian-based company to introduce an Islamic fund in the Maldives. And not just an ordinary fund, it actually utilizes artificial intelligence instead of the human fund managers. So this is quite an exciting time for us with the Sandbox initiative in Maldives.
Thank you very much, Ishraq. Tanvir, any thoughts?
Yeah, thank you. So for me, really just I wanted to just add one more comment around the outsourcing. And so one of the things that's really critical is with Islamic finance is to make sure that the unit economics of the service is low. And I'm thinking particularly from a startup perspective. And so outsourcing is a way to help keep your costs low. So if I share just really briefly that the startup that I work at, we outsource our credit operations. So that means when customers are applying for personal loans, we have our automated algorithm does maybe about 65% of the applications, and the balance is reviewed by credit officers in the Philippines. So my push would be to look at, if, considering Maldives, very educated population, good command of English, how could that be a service provider for Islamic fintechs globally, right? Just to offer a call center with credit officers who can handle and do diligence on customers, and just start with that basis. And then from there, you could really do wonders, because now the Philippines is so advanced. We have staff there who are able to work as professionally and as capably as any finance professional in Australia. So that would be my big push there and
Great,
suggestion.
great.
For the outcome.
Very nice to see. Osman, can we have some views from you?